And a good football summer morning here on Birds 365. You've got Mac and Mac, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. We're here to spend the next 2 hours with you, the next 5 days with you. Oh, we're going to be here all summer until the Eagles report to training camp. Johnny Mac, how was your Father's Day weekend?
It was great. Happy belated Father's Day to you, Jody. I hope everybody had a good weekend. And yeah, I mean it's heating up for the summer finally, and it's heating down. It's cooling off for the Eagles in the lull, but we're here for you. We're here for the hardcore Eagles fans.
Which I always forget is the first day of summer, the 20th, the 21st, the 22nd
21st, I think.
is
June
the
20.
summer solstice.
Yes,
Is
yes,
that
yes.
what they call it? Yeah.
So technically, we're still in spring
By 2 days. Yeah.
later this week. Yeah.
But summer does officially kick in. It's been summer for the Eagles for over a week now. Everybody downtime, not much going on. So we're looking for topics to talk about with you. And I saw one today on, of all places, sportsillustrated.com, as written by one Ed Kratz. Good job, Eddie K. Our buddy and pal John's compatriot from Sports Illustrated. He pointed out something that we've talked about plenty over the years. The fact that when the season gets underway for the Philadelphia Eagles, they will be attempting to be the first team to win back-to-back divisions in the NFC East in 20 years. It's now been 20 years since a team has gone back-to-back champion of the NFC East. And I remember first bringing this up. Eagles won 4 in a row, as a matter of fact, from 2001 to 2004. And when it got to 5 straight years of different division titles, I said, that's interesting. When it got to 10 straight years of different division titles, I said, man, why can't a team put together back-to-back years? When it got to 15 years of nobody winning the NFC 2 straight years, I go, what the hell's going on here? And now we're up to 20. If someone other than the Philadelphia Eagles wins the division this year, it'll be 20 straight years of different divisional winners. You got an explanation for this, McMullen?
Yeah, you haven't had that consistent dominance. If you look back, I think people don't give Andy Reid, I always say, enough credit when he was the head coach of the
Yep.
Eagles, because they didn't win a Super Bowl, but they were consistently good. All the playoffs appearances, all the NFC championship appearances. And that was the whole game plan, right? Chetty was, his whole thought process is if you're good every year, you'll get in the dance, and if the stars align, you'll win one. It's happened for Andy, but unfortunately, it happened in Kansas City a few times now, and who knows with Patrick Mahomes how many more. But if 2003, 2004, so I'd have to look it up, but those were like 12, 13 win teams. For the Eagles, really good teams, really, really good teams. I would say if you get up, and those were 16, now we're up to 17 regular
17
season
game
games.
season. Yep.
But, if you got up to 12, and I always use Peyton Manning as the example because the consistency in Indianapolis was so impressive over a long period of time. If you get up to 12, you're a really good team. If you're above 12, you're a great team, basically. And then you get 10 11s and you're having a good year, blah, blah, blah. And there was a lot of 10 or 11s in there. And so I'll pull it up as we're talking. I have no idea. This is just, I'm talking, on the face of it. There were a few really good teams, but there wasn't consistency. So, all right, 2003 Eagles were 12. So right in the range, I said 2004 was 13. And that was it. That was the last team to win back-to-back.
Right.
And then you had 11, 10. You had the 2007 Cowboys were really good, 13. Giants came back the next year with 12. They were really good. Then you have a bunch of nothings, 11, 10, 9, 10, 10, before you get to the 2014 Cowboys, which won 12. And the 2016 Cowboys, which won 13. The 2017 Eagles up to 13. Then you had another lull, 21 Cowboys, 112, and obviously the Eagles last year. So that consistency hasn't been there for these teams, and that's what the Eagles are chasing. And they've been better than anybody else over this span in the NFC East as far as winning division titles. But you have these little spurts. And it's been mainly Eagles, Cowboys, Eagles, Cowboys, Eagles, Cowboys, and the Giants and Commanders have kind of fallen behind for a lot of reasons. Um, Giants probably made a bad decision going way back to Jerry Reese and Tom Coughlin. And they made a lot of and it was bad coaching decision after bad coaching decision after bad coaching decision, bad executive decision with Dave Gettleman. And they finally seem to be back on the right path, and maybe they can get to some of that consistency with Brian Daboll and Joe Shane and Daniel Snyder. I mean, it's impossible to be consistently good with that ownership. And that's what's happened to Washington. So you've had Eagles, Cowboys, and the Eagles have been a little bit better than the Cowboys, but that was the disappointment of 2017. You finally win the Super Bowl, and they had the new normal post up all over the place, and it wasn't. It was they made the playoffs again, and they were good, but they took that step back. So New England would be the best example. To be consistently good year in and year out in this league, which is, let's be honest, Jody, it is built for parity. They built it this way on purpose.
Yep.
So when you see the outlier like New England or even Indianapolis, and they kind of battled each other, and obviously the Patriots on top more often than not, that's the outlier. It's really because free agent, look at how much the Eagles lost, and you got to rebuild it again. They've done a tremendous job, and Howie Roseman gets all his flowers, deservedly so. But look at all the players they lost, and that's being the runner-up.
Right. They didn't win the Super Bowl, but they did win the division. Don't forget that Taylor Heineke won division for the Commanders.
Yeah, which tells you the 2020 Washington football team at the time was 7-9.
7-9. Won a division at 7-9, but it's a division just the same for Taylor Heineke and the Commanders. You're right about them. You want to drop it at somebody towards Daniel Snyder more than anybody else. But yeah, the Eagles, and Eddie's angle on his story was, now you've got 3 underdogs chasing you. They're all underdogs, and they understand they get to play the underdog card. The Cowboys, who made the playoffs and won a playoff game. That's right. The Cowboys, sorry to say, Cowboy haters, they did win a playoff game before they got picked off by the 49ers. They're an underdog to the Eagles, and the Giants are an underdog to the Eagles, and the Commanders certainly are an underdog because their one divisional win in umpteen years was a 7-9 season. Good luck there, Sam Howell, and good luck to Ed Kratz, the biggest Sam Howell fan in the Delaware Valley. But I'm giving Ed credit for doing this article about the underdog. How much is that a positive, playing the underdog? Because I remember a year, not all that long ago, 2017, John, when the Eagle players were donning underdog masks everywhere, heading off to a pretty big win at the end of the season that they were underdog against the Falcons at home, against the Vikings at home, underdog against the Patriots, and they ended up having a parade as an underdog. How much does underdog status explain 20 straight years without a repeat winner in the division?
Yeah, I don't, probably not today because we're going to have Zach Berman on, and his book about the 2017 Super Bowl team is called Underdogs, and they embraced it. And so obviously why, but I maintain, and I'll maintain this to the day I die, Jody. They were not underdogs. Everybody knew how good they were. They were underdogs literally because the quarterback, who was en route to being the MVP, tore his ACL late in the season. Like, everybody knew that was the best team by that point. Not at the beginning of the season. I always thought it was sort of Carolina. Everybody knew the Eagles were the best team in the NFC, at least by that point. Not going to say they knew they were better, because I do think even with Carson Wentz healthy, playing at the level, if he never got hurt, if he won MVP, they would have been massive favorites over Atlanta. They would have been massive favorites over Minnesota at home. They would have probably been underdogs in the Super Bowl to New England because New England's New England, even though they shouldn't have been probably in that scenario. In that scenario, they probably literally would have been underdogs. But yeah, I always thought that narrative was bull crap. Other than this reason, Jody, the players bought into it. That's
Right.
all you need. That's all you need.
Exactly. Well, what John McMullen thinks, what Jody McDonald thinks is nice. The thing that matters is how the players react, how the players believe, how the players sell themselves and self-motivate. And they did. I will never forget Lane Johnson out there with that dog mask on right after the
game. They
bought into
it
lock, stock, and barrel.
And use whatever you need to use. And Doug Peterson did a tremendous job of that. But, just from the standpoint, see, to me, and again, everything comes down to definitions. To me, real underdogs are, you don't know they're that good and they jump up. Like the Giants when they beat the Patriots. That's a significant underdog, beating an undefeated Patriots team and whatever the hell they were, 9-7. I mean, that's ridiculous. That kind of stuff doesn't happen every day. Well, obviously, you don't have undefeated teams every day, but that to me is, clear, defined all season. Everybody knew that was a massive underdog. That's my only point about that. But use whatever you can. And Doug Peterson used it beautifully because everybody was saying, "Oh, the season's over. Oh, the season," and he used it. And I give Doug Peterson more credit than anybody else for that because he was able to motivate the guys that way, and they had the great team, and they played great, and they continued to play great. Players that played great all season played great. They continued. They didn't say, "Woe is me. We don't have our quarterback," and they went out and won the only Super Bowl championship in franchise history. So all the credit to Doug Peterson for that. And the 7-9 Washington Commanders, like if you go over the span, so 2003, 2004, the Giants haven't won a division title since 2011, Jody. And their three division titles.
12 years?
Yeah, their three division titles were 11 wins, 12 wins in 2008. They were a good team. Then 9 wins in the 2011 when they won the Super Bowl, beat the Patriots, the undefeated regular season, 18-0 coming into that game. Washington has won 3 as well over that span. 10 wins, 9 wins, 7 wins. And that has been Cowboys, Eagles, back and forth, back and forth. And it's going to continue to be that way. And that's got to be your concern. There's only one team that can beat the Eagles in the NFC East this year. Only one team. Now, and this is, as is everything, I hope people understand, barring massive injuries. If you lose your quarterback, if you lose a bunch of all-pro level players, that could change things. But if you're relatively healthy, only the Cowboys have a chance to beat the Eagles.
I would agree with that. And I don't think there's as big a disparity between the Cowboys and the Giants as you do. Cowboys are certainly number 2. Would I be surprised at the Cowboys beat the Eagles? Yes. Would I be shocked? I can't get there. And I don't know that I would even be shocked if I would say that the Giants can't win this division at 10-7. Now, you're right. The injuries come into play. That changes everything drastically. This is saying relative health for everyone. I do, even though I'm not a Danny Dimes fan, I just like their coach. I like the offseason they've had. They had a good draft. I think the Giants are I think the gap, Eagle fans will like hearing this, I think the gap between the Giants and the Cowboys is less than the gap between the Cowboys and the Eagles. I think the Eagles are that much better than the Cowboys are that much better than the Giants. And sorry to say, Ron Rivera fans, yeah, I think the Commanders are bringing up the back end again this year. Good luck with Sammy Howell, who is going to be their starting quarterback. Rivera came out and said that this weekend. No great surprise because Howell took all the number 1 snaps during their spring get-togethers. But Yeah, I'm not picking Sam Howell to get out of last place this year.
Yeah, well, I'm with you with the Giants from the perspective of I think they're headed in the right direction. But I think, I think they finally, after all those years of just bad, it was Ben McAdoo, it was Pat Shermer, it was I mean, just bad decision after bad
Yeah,
decision
but the
after bad.
Eagles went from 4-11 with the last year of Doug Peterson to playoffs to Super Bowl. So you don't think the Giants can do that in year 2?
No, I don't, for the reason because I think that that last Doug Peterson season was an anomaly. And Nick Sirianni's actually said this. Typically, when you take over a team, you got some issues on the offensive and defensive lines. Typically, you're taking over bad teams, and typically, you have some big issues that you have to fix on both sides of the football. The Eagles built that way. They had that awful season of injuries on the offensive line, guys, just incredible attrition. And all of a sudden, you have all these good players on the and Nick just walks in and he's got Kelsey and Johnson and ends up all these great players and turns into Isaac Seumalo later and Landon Dickerson, and Isaac was already there. And he's, to his credit, he said that. He said, and the defensive line, same way. When Schwartz was here, it was the same thing. He called it the engine of his defense. That's how the Eagles built their team. So they weren't a 4-win football team. They were on paper, but not talent-wise. The Giants were talent deficient. And they're still talent deficient, but they're getting better. And that's bad news for Eagles fans because they got guys making good decisions. And that's good for Giants fans, bad for Eagles fans, but I don't think they're there yet. Giants, I'm talking.
Yeah, I'm a little bit higher on the Giant talent than you are. I think they had a good offseason. I think they had a good draft. And I do think, and they're a team that did not only make the playoffs, but won a playoff game. And I know it's against the really tough to gauge and understand Minnesota Vikings, who won 13 games, but every game by the skin of their teeth, except when they got blown out. I know it's kind of a weird year for Minnesota, but Giants did win a road playoff game, which how many teams in the NFL last year won a road playoff game? About 3. That's saying something. So
because I was saying all year, this is not revisionist history. That Minnesota team was a house of cards, particularly because defensively. Now, if they would have came in here and just put up an effort and lost by 10 points, even 13 points, made it a little bit difficult for the Eagles the next week, I would have put more stock in that win in Minnesota. But they got boat raced, Jody. They got destroyed. They were not prepared to play a team on the Eagles level, nor should they be. They kind of overachieved. And by the way, Minnesota's going through the same thing because they didn't expect to be that good on paper. And all of a sudden, people are looking at them and saying, well, you won 13 games. Why are you releasing Dalvin Cook? Why are you releasing Zadarius Smith? Why are you potentially trading Danielle Hunter? Well, they didn't really. They won 13 games literally, but to their credit, and I'm not a big Kwesi fan, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, but to his credit, he's being realistic with himself. They won 13 games, but they're not a significant contender. And by the way, I'll be the first to say, Jody, I don't like that mentality because they're basically ripping it down.
Yeah, they win 13 games. Let's go into rebuild mode.
Well, yeah.
I wouldn't be happy if I were a Viking fan. I can tell you that right now.
And I get that from a fan perspective, but I do think it's important if you're a general manager to be honest with yourself. And I think Joe Shane's the same way. He's honest with himself. He didn't expect to be that good last year on paper. And I think he knows he's not at the level of the Eagles to say the
All
least.
right. So here's my question for you, John. Should we just move straight ahead to a rematch in the NFC East, but in the NFC Championship game between the 49ers and the Eagles?
No, because
Why are we going through the rod of the 17 games if the
well,
Eagles and the 49ers are that much better
well,
than
you
everybody
know
else?
why? Because there's injury, there's attrition. I just said there's a 4-win season. That was an anomaly for the Eagles because of injuries for the main part, and also other things. I mean, Carson Wentz and the his almost inexplicable slide from being a good player to being out of the league in a couple of years. He's still looking for a job, trying to hang on to John Gruden as they both try to reclimate together. That season was an anomaly, and it happens all the time. It could be injuries. It could be um, it could be a player coming off the rails. Could be a player suspension. A key suspension. We've seen that in the past around the NFL. There's a lot of things that happen. That's why you play the games. But Jody McDonald is the one who said, I think you have the Eagles as the favorite. I think you have the 49ers. You're higher on the 49ers than me because of the quarterback. And I love the 49ers. Are they the two best teams on paper?
Oh, easy.
Yeah, probably. Can Dallas beat them? Well, you can say they haven't done anything in the playoffs, which is fair. You only got to do it once, and they have the talent to do it. I don't think they're going to do it, but they can do it. And then there's going to be some other teams that jump up. And the NFC on paper looks bad. Seattle's a team I have my eye on. Detroit's a team. Maybe New Orleans because of the upgrade in quarterback. I would have said Minnesota, but they are ripping it down, as we just said. So you got to put them in the back seat. Maybe Chicago. You're a big Justin Fields guy.
Yeah.
Maybe Green Bay.
Chicago. What was the worst team to make the playoffs last year? 9-7-1? Were the Giants 9-7-1? Did they get the last playoff spot? I'm trying to. Well, Tampa was the worst because they won a division.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the final wild card spot. I think the Bears are got a real time chance to be a 9-7 team, and that puts them in the mix for that last wild card spot because there is no killer in that division. I'm not as high on Detroit as you are. Minnesota.
Well, and by the way, Detroit's already hampered by the suspensions. I mean,
exactly.
So things like that happen. I said it last week. I brought it up. I forget what we were talking about. Bill Parcells, one of his great quotes: 4 or 5 things happen every day in the NFL that you don't want to happen as a head coach. And if you can't deal with it, you got to get another job. But his whole point is, I don't know what it is, Jody, but shit's going to come at Nick Sirianni. It is. Even with that talent, it's going to come. And it might be injuries. It might be off the field stuff. It might be something else. It might be issues with the coaching staff and the changes. Could be a whole host of things. But you're going to have to overcome adversity. Even the 16-0 Patriots had to overcome adversity to get to 16-0 before blowing it. It's coming, but the Eagles are better equipped for it than most teams.
Right. And it hasn't come yet during this offseason. And now they're into the downtime, and then the camp will open up, and we'll see if and when and how it's coming. But it hasn't come through drama. The Eagles have had basically no drama since the draft, after they got lucky enough that maybe the most talented player in the draft fell down to number 9, where they could just trade up one spot and get him. Things have gone the Eagles' way this offseason, and it's been sans drama. I think the biggest thing was last week, Darius Slay having to explain that he and Matt Patricia are okay at a Detroit golf charity thing. That's not a whole hell of a lot of drama for the Eagles during this offseason, and good on them for that. Who gets more credit for that, Nick Sirianni or Howie Roseman?
I guess, they both deserve credit. But, when it comes to when it comes to, I don't know what you want to call it, off the field stuff, I'll just throw that
Drama. That's
large.
the word I used. If you
All right,
get my
drama. When it
definition of
comes,
drama, the Eagles have been drama free this offseason. Who gets the most credit? The coach or the general manager?
I would say the general manager, because I think that has more to do with bringing in whether you want to call them mature, use more mature players. In other words, I don't think a bad guy comes into a certain situation and turns into a good guy. So I think it's avoiding those people, and that's why I give them the benefit of the doubt with Jalen Carter. To be honest, for the most part, they do a good job with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but you did tell me CJ was a big personality.
It's big personality. I didn't tell you he was a bad guy. Big personality.
Drama.
Well, he's a pain in the ass, is what I described.
Yeah, I'm trying to find that middle ground between being a bad person, but also someone who can cause issues and just disturbances. I know we're having a little bit of a semantical debate here, but GJ was a guy who, made some ruffles in the locker room. They don't even have that this year.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to compare it to the old Sixers with the Jimmy Butler versus Ben Simmons thing. Jimmy could be a pain in the ass at times, but he wasn't a bad guy. Versus the immaturity and entitlement of Ben Simmons, the Sixers made the wrong decision there. One's a bad guy in a different way. I'm not saying he's robbing banks or doing bad things off the court. He's just a bad guy from a basketball standpoint. He doesn't want to do what he needs to do to become a better basketball player. Whereas Jimmy Butler is a pain in the ass at times, but he's ultra competitive. He's always trying to win. He's always fighting and kicking and clawing. That's the guy you want. You can both say to the outside looking in, he's a bit of an ass, Jimmy Butler. But from a standpoint of a team, that's the kind of guy you want, and that's the kind of guy you want to try to harness. That's what they were trying to do with CJ, and they did for 1 year. It didn't last as long as it could have, it should have. And then after he left, you saw some of the negative, taking his shots and all that kind of stuff, because he's kind of a pain in the you-know-what. Not a bad guy. Is he a bad guy from a football standpoint? I don't think on the field. Maybe off the field, maybe he is a little bit. But they don't do a lot of that, and they don't have a lot of those issues. You're always going to have some. Nobody's perfect. They brought in Darryl Worley. They brought him back home. He gets arrested right outside the NovaCare complex. People forget because they cut him right away. They said, all right, we made a mistake. Let's get him out of here.
Right. And in football, you got a 53-man roster. So in baseball, it's only 25. NBA, it's only 15. The more players you add, the more chance you get to have a guy who's going to fall off the straight and narrow path. So for the Eagles to be in the position they're in is pretty darn impressive. If you want to give Howie slightly more credit than Sirianni, I can't really blame you, because Sirianni had them together for 20 minutes during the spring, getting together. You're there for about the 20 minutes, 15 out of the 20 they had. So I don't know how much credit I can give to
100
him.
minutes, Jody. We got to see, but they were there for far longer. Again, the Eagles value the behind the scenes stuff, the meetings and the education and the teaching and the walkthroughs more than the actual practice.
And you heard no rumors whatsoever on eraser fights in the classrooms there where they spent their majority of the time. So maybe the coaching staff should get some credit. So far be it from me to try and stir things up, but I will go ahead and do it anyway. Howie Roseman this offseason. They still got a couple positions where if the right guy falls, the best trade can be made. They'll still look and upgrade the roster, but it's pretty darn well set. So Howie is twiddling his thumbs in his office. Any chance he starts thinking about contract extensions? The Eagles have been very good during Howie Roseman's era to make the right move at the right time, to extend a guy, to identify one of their core players and get a contract done when it might be more advantageous, team friendly, and the like. They got a couple of guys. The sweet spot is 2-year players who don't have that 5th-year option. A guy who's been on the team for 2 years. Once you get to that 3rd year, now they're a year away from free agency. They're going, damn, why should I sign a contract? Let me go to free agent. I'm that good. I can get that much more. Let me get teams bidding against each other. So the sweet spot is right around that 2-year spot. They've got a couple of pretty good players, guys who have already contributed, guys, one who's been already awarded in his short career, and the other one who's part of a big mix. Landon Dickerson, Milton Williams, both drafted 2 years ago, both already contributing to the team, both non-first round draft picks, so their contract will be up in 2 years. Are those two guys Howie Roseman should be talking to about contract extension?
No, because you have to wait to the 3rd year to be eligible for an extension. So, he could start formulating, and they generally, the Eagles are well ahead of the curve. Think about Jalen Hurts. I mean, wasn't eligible. Not that they would have made that move, but he wasn't eligible till this year for a contract extension. They got it done. So I'm sure he's got, Bryce Johnson and Jace Rosenberg putting together the skeleton of guys he knows are going to be here long term. But I mean, can't do it. You can't do it. So you don't have to worry about it until you can do it.
All right. So then let me throw you one more name. This is not a draft pick. This is a completely eligible to have a contract extension with now. Again, 2 years out. Because once you get to within a year, the player is tempted to go, yeah, let's play this out. Let's get to free agency and let me see if I can get other teams interested in it. Hassan Reddick now has only 2 years left on his deal. They did a 3-year deal with him. A lot of times that bigger player, and yeah, he was coming off a good year, and then anything like the year that he had for the Eagles, had a career year last year, and you don't usually like to negotiate after a career year, but 12 months from now, not even 9, 8, 10 months from now, Hassan Reddick's going to be on the last year of his contract. You have contract extension talks with him right now?
No, I wouldn't. He outperformed his contract. He's actually underpaid, so that to me is more of an issue from the player perspective. If Hassan and his agent want to play hardball and say, "Look, we outperformed," the Eagles are going to have some issues because they have so many good players, and probably you hit on one because they just drafted Nolan Smith. And you have Nolan Smith very cost effective now for a number of years as a first round pick. But if Hassan Reddick puts together another season like he had last season, you're talking.
If you get an extension done now, you don't have to worry about him going out and getting 18 cents.
Yeah, but and who we were just talking about Danielle Hunter. There's a price to pay for getting that deal done early. That has been the Eagles' history. That was Minnesota's history under Rick Spielman. Get guys done early. And if you get it right, and the Vikings got it.
It's a risk either way. It could be a boon or it can be a failure.
But the reason I'm bringing him up is because they got it right with Hunter. And then he was pissed off a year and a half in because he signed for such under market value. And all of a sudden you have a disgruntled player, and you've had a disgruntled player for 4 or 5 years now. And it's always in perpetuity of you having the disgruntled pay. So it's sort of the unintended consequence. If you sign Hassan Reddick, and first of all, you had such a great season last year, I don't know if it's possible. But if you re-up him at under market value, and all of a sudden the guy's getting, because remember, the cap's going to keep going up, and he's going to be underpaid again. That's the unintended consequence, and that's where Hunter just held out of minicamp, wants a trade. You have that sort of back and forth, and that's a concern. And the other position is wide receiver, because you're paying A.J. Brown a ton of money, and Devontae Smith's going to get to that situation where you have to pay him a ton of money, and then what do you do? It's typical. It's a nice problem to have, but it's difficult.
That's still 3 years down the road. Hassan's only 2, because you got that 5th-year option with Devontae, and that's why I think.
But that 5th-year option, man. But again, yes, you have it in your back pocket in the worst case scenario. You don't want a pissed off player. And if you're going to underpay a guy throughout, he's eligible after his 3rd season, and you're going to underpay, all of a sudden you have a disgruntled guy. Now, it doesn't look like that's Devontae Smith's personality, but I will say 2 things. You never know when guys feel slighted, number one, and he's going to have an agent whispering in his ear saying you're slighted. And number 2, the Eagles generally don't do business that way. To their credit, they generally want to be fair to their players, especially the players that produce. So they generally don't go down that route. It's a nice fallback to have, the 5th-year option, but sometimes it's not realistic if a player performs at a certain level.
I'd rather have it and not need it than not have it and need it. So I think the Eagles are actually in good shape there. And Devontae does seem, again, I'm judging character on a guy who's only been here 2 years. His agent will be a bigger hassle than, but we thought that the quarterback's agent could have been potential issue since cutting the big.
I didn't.
He was
others
ever going to cut. No, when you've got an agent who's never done that mega a deal, you do have concerns. They got it done. You were right. Eagles got it done. Congratulations to her and to Jalen for coming to what seemed to be a very fair contract agreement. Yeah, I was actually concerned. All right, quick timeout. Then we come back. Zach Berman, the author of Underdogs. We'll run that whole underdog thing by him when we get him up. Eagles down season. We're up with Zach Berman next here on Birds 365.